Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, September 18th. This is a special meeting of the Darien Board of Education's Curriculum Committee. We are excited for our first meeting of this school year and grateful to have all of our fabulous staff around the table that will update us on what went on over the summer and what's looking forward. So I will turn it right over to Dr. Fettigan.
Okay, thank you so much, Mrs. Parent. Good morning, everyone. I want to acknowledge there's such a great deal of work that happens over the summer. Of course, our most important work happens when we open our school doors to our staff and children to begin a new year. But a lot does happen in the summer to get us ready and to ensure that we're improving our teaching practices and strengthening our curriculum so that we can give our children the best possible experience each school year. So I am joined today by almost everyone on our team from the teaching and learning or the curriculum and instruction department. And it's really important. I know there are a lot of people around the table right now, but I want to make sure that we're honoring their work and their leadership and practice. And also beyond this group at the table, the work and leadership that happens again with all of our staff and our colleagues out in the schools. So this presentation will share highlights from the summer work, but certainly doesn't comprehensively capture everything because it's just, there's so much elbow grease that goes into this. And we're really proud of the work to share with you this morning. So we're going to start today by anchoring, like we always do, into our core values and mission and vision of the school district. One of the things that Dr. Byrne and I are talking about is how important it is to anchor all of our work, whether it's our curriculum efforts, our instructional efforts, our assessment efforts, how we frame professional learning, into the core values, mission and vision of the graduate. This is really how we center our work. And really this helps us clarify what should be priority in our work as we move forward. We thought today that we would start kind of in a very similar way that we started with our new to Darien colleagues in August. It seems like forever ago now, but it was really just about a month ago. When we were welcoming our new to district staff, we asked them to think about our vision of the graduate, which we're sure that when they were studying and thinking about applying to the district, they definitely were doing some research. And we wanted to engage a little bit more about what this is and how it's really the North Star for our practice. So we thought this morning, a little bit different than what we normally do, we would engage everyone around the table, including you, our board members, in thinking about the same thing we asked our new to Darien staff. What skills do we think students need to receive instruction in, practice in, and receive feedback on to develop mastery of the competencies and the vision of the graduate? So we know that when we think about the teaching and learning standards, the content standards and the practice standards, it's really clear. It's really clearly articulated what children need to know at the end of each grade level. And that's the floor, not the ceiling. We want to make sure that we're providing more robust and rigorous learning opportunities. So when we think about those attributes of the vision of the graduate, like creativity and integrity and independence, what do we think are some of the skills that kids would really need to be able to practice, to learn, practice, and get feedback on?
I'm going to jump in and say problem solving. It'll foster some independence, and I think that goes across curricular in all our departments where kids will be able to use the skills that they learned in all their classes to solve various tasks.
Collaboration is important.
Okay.
Being able to work with colleagues and people who are like-minded and different-minded to come up to help solve those problems together in a way that is efficient and effective.
I think in that collaboration, being empathetic to the people that they're working with and understanding that different viewpoints add to the solutions to those problems and not necessarily take away from the solutions of those problems.
I would add to that, when there are actions in terms of communicating and collaborating and critical thinking, we're doing it with transparency, honesty, and integrity.
I would add to that. Ronit, I would add to that the idea that students know their learning styles. They know how they're able to acquire the information and what their modalities are of how they learn best. And in keeping with what you were saying, Ronnie, to be able to say and go to their teachers and say, this is what I need. Can you help me understand it in this manner? So understanding their learning style and what they need to access teaching and learning.
I would say along the lines of communication, public speaking is very important and really building those skills and articulation among our students. It's key for anything they do for the rest of their lives.
I think learning to tolerate productive struggle, especially in areas where they're not used to maybe new areas like art or music for students to be able to develop new skills and learn how to master a new competency.
And I'll build on that. Productive struggle with perseverance. The problems of our world are not easy these days. And so having that perseverance.
Well, I don't want to be left out, so I'll jump on in here. So one of the things I'm going to hit on my slide in a little while is about the makerspace, the opportunity for creative outlets and creative expression of understanding. And so that's, I think, a really valuable opportunity here within our Vision of the Graduate.
We'd welcome to hear some thoughts from the board members too. If there's anything that hasn't been mentioned that you'd like to share with us that comes to your mind when you think of these attributes of Vision of the Graduate.
Well, I think that was a really great list and I like the way that you guys pulled into it. I also think resourcefulness is important, right? Like when you face a problem, when you how are you going to attack it? How are you going to find the information?
I would say also competency in written communications so that you can really master the ability to communicate your ideas in a clear and effective way, because I think that's also a skill that as they go through college and after that will be incredibly important.
And I built, somebody said resilience, and I think that's true, but in learning to be independent and be able to, rely on yourself and your self-confidence to solve a problem.
And one other thing on the creativity front, I think it's really important to stress openness to all different kinds of ideas and that no idea is wrong, to allow them to really have the ability to kind of think out of the box and not feel that their ideas might be, laughed at or thought of as crazy. And, just that there's no fear in failure, because if you're going to be creative, you have to have the ability to kind of have confidence that anything is on the table. And I think that's an important skill in any of the disciplines, really.
If I can add to that, thinking about giving our students the tools and skills they need to be able to ask the questions that they need to ask to help them navigate that curiosity and to also help keep that curiosity alive and help them figure out how to problem solve together and giving them those tools.
Not really a skill, but I think for me, and it's sort of missing from the actual Vision of the Graduate, but really making sure that each of our students finds a purpose and figuring out what it is that they think that they are good at, and then going to strive to be excellent at that. Excellence to me is like one of the core building blocks of our entire town. And that it's included in the educational process. So it doesn't really matter what you want to be excellent at. It could be playing the violin, it could be playing sports, it can be, playing chess, it could be anything, but really figuring out who you are and what you want to be. I think that that's like getting, as you graduate from high school, at least having some foundation in that, I think is really important to set this, set the stage for the next part of life.
Just one more thing, and this has to do with artificial intelligence, which I know is in the slides at some point in the presentation, but I think increasingly important because of artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, et cetera. Particularly as you look forward to the job market and as they graduate from high school and then college, what are the skills that are going to be really, really necessary that cannot be replaced by a computer? And to make sure that we are instilling in our students the ability to gain those kinds of skills, which are more interpersonal skills and creative skills and creative thinking and communication. So, and I think the Vision of the Graduate is a great, great start at that. That's becoming, I think, increasingly more relevant as we've kind of gone through this technological innovation.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all of those ideas. I think that for many of us as educators, everything we've just talked about is kind of our why, right? Like how exciting is it to be able to be a part of children's development in all of these areas alongside their families. So we feel really, I know I can speak for all of us, really fortunate. The mom in me, when I think about my own 4 children, having these experiences in school and life, what a gift it is that we can participate with all of you in helping to guide your children in this way and everyone in the Darien Public Schools. So I really want to also say the piece about failure, failure is like first attempt in learning. And when children come to school, if they're not met with things that are causing them to struggle and have productive struggle, and they're doing things they already know, that's really not learning. And Greg, to your point, excuse me, about excellence, it is so critically important that we recognize that excellence is really, it's individual. And there are just going to be so many paths that our children choose to take, and how as administration and the board, we need to continue to create those pathways for all kids to find that. Is really work that I know everyone around this table, board and administration, is passionate about. So we did begin the conversation with our new to district staff that way. And what was interesting is, regardless of if they were a related service provider, an elementary staff member, a secondary staff member, whether they were someone who taught social studies, or whether they were somebody who was a school psychologist, everybody could anchor into that. And we asked them to think about, given your role in the school system, how will you contribute to children making progress toward the tenets of vision of the graduate? The standards go without saying. The content standards and the practice standards, that's a given. We want to make sure that we're, again, being more rigorous and robust in the opportunities we're providing. We also talked about the fact that everything we just discussed here at the table and in that room that day, those are things that we aspire to help our children develop, but they're things that also, as leaders and those who model in classrooms and out in related service offices, we want to make sure that the adults are modeling all of those things and practicing and improving in all of those areas as well. The next part of our conversation was really about the assessment practices. And what you'll hear about today, and especially Robin, you'll hear about in all of our curriculum committee meetings moving forward, artificial intelligence is certainly changing the landscape, right? Most things children for years have been able to, and people can look up on the computer to get an answer, and you can ask ChatGPT to do a lot of things for you. So this is going to cause us to think differently about how we instruct and how we assess for learning. I know that Dr. Byrne did mention the World Economic Forum during his opening remarks at the beginning of this school year. And we wanted to also say that so many things that you just named in the vision of the graduate, and so many of the related skills and dispositions to develop around the vision of the graduate, the World Economic Forum recognizes as the most critical areas for children to develop, or for people to develop, to have success in their future endeavors. And so when we think about it's really, again, beyond content standards, it's that combination of the cognitive piece, like the knowledge that people have to have in different content areas, and also the elements that are more related to self-efficacy, the interpersonal traits, how we work with others, to be really thinking critically and be able to contribute in groups. Just as a quick reminder, it's important that we're thinking systemically about our curriculum, instruction, and assessment efforts. So as you know, we do write and revise our curriculum according to a 7-year cycle. It doesn't mean that everything is lockstep in a 7-year cycle, as we've discussed before. If there's new legislation, that would be an impetus for change and cause us to revise, in an area. If there are new standards written, like in social studies, that would cause us to think about revising curriculum. And we also just want to make sure that the curriculum is not outdated. When you think about technology, certainly we need to think about how we revise our curricula to be responsive. We're always anchoring into vision of the graduate, again, because we need to think beyond the content standards, really more towards transfer and application. So as promised, we're keeping a really close eye, and these are really small numbers here. I just wanted to show this as kind of an artifact and evidence of the fact that we are progress monitoring our own work across all of the departments in curriculum writing. And you may be aware that at the end of this school year, there is a requirement that all school districts will have their scope and sequences available for the public on the website. So we're way ahead in some areas. And then if you look, again at the small numbers, in other areas, we have some work to do still. We can say as a team, we're committed to having those scope and sequences completed by the end of the year, and our stage 1, which is that higher, kind of the skills, the knowledge, and the essential questions, that kind of larger view of what children will do in each course and in each unit. And that will be our ongoing work throughout the year. A lot of our curriculum, probably 30% of it, is written over the summer, and we intentionally continue that work throughout the school year to ensure that there are quality controls and that we're working alongside our colleagues as that curriculum is developed. And our faculty and families will be able to continue to have a look at those curriculum documents and EduPlanet. I want to welcome Jen Jen, who is Jen Falcone, our new Director of Elementary Education
morning.
over there in the corner. And Jen and I have been working really side by side and very closely with regard to the elementary work. And I'll take this elementary slide because Jen really just got here. Although I do feel like she's been here for a bit and has a good sense of where our work is. So certainly, Jen, at any point,
Jump in.
you know, you can feel like you can jump in. All right, so this has been a very busy summer with regard to our elementary work. As you know, last year we piloted the K-3 Into Reading resource. We have 2 core reading resources, 2 literacy resources at the K-3 level, Into Reading, and then Heggerty for an extra boost for phonemic awareness at kindergarten and first grade. We do have new social studies standards. So we have had a team of writers in who've been working to revise the social studies curriculum, beginning with grades 4 and 5. We're working on integrating those IEB assessments, and you'll hear that from some of the other department chairs. Those are the assessments that are part of the Smarter Balance assessments and NGSS assessments that really give children the opportunity to practice demonstrating what they know in similar question types that they'll see on those standardized assessments. And then, of course, we'll have ongoing work with regard to developing the scope and sequences and our play-based learning units. The professional learning for the year ahead is going to focus on K-3 literacy, obviously, and 4-5. And at this point, Jen, you want to talk about your work, what you're jumping into?
Absolutely. We've already kicked off the year with a very busy start. I feel so lucky to be working with just phenomenal staff, even our administrators, but just the depth of knowledge that our teacher leaders have in this district. I'm just very honored to be joining them. So we already had an early release day where we really were able to dig into the modules and really pull out key critical skills and strategies and work on planning across our continuum for high quality literacy instruction. And so they're spending a lot of time really matching the program resource to what we spend a lot of time, as you know, developing that framework for high quality literacy instruction. And same with our 4th and 5th grade. They were working very heavily in really digging into looking at our students' artifacts of writing, looking at them, analyzing them for trends and deciding really how to move forward with small group instruction to meet the needs of our individual learners. And there was a lot of fabulous thinking around all of our different buildings. In November and January, we have additional full days of professional learning where we will have guidance from HMH. And I will say they have been doing a fabulous job. Amy and I have been working very closely with the representatives from that company to really make sure that the learning is tailored to our needs and to our framework and expectations for literacy instruction. And we will continue that work on those full days. We've also been finalizing the updated progress reports that should be coming out shortly. A lot of intent and work and effort has been spent on designing the rubrics that will be compatible and support the teachers in completing those progress reports and really providing our families with the in-depth information about where exactly their learners are on the continuum. And along with that, working on, what small group instruction really looks like specifically in our areas of intervention when students have been identified as needing some additional support.
Thank you, Jen. We also have had a first cohort of general education and special education teachers, and Shirley may want to add on to this, involved in Orton Gillingham Associate Training. So we had educators first on the general ed side begin that work in the summer, and Shirley's continued with that work this school year.
And tribute to summer work, there were close to 30 teachers receiving OG training. We began our OG Academy with a cohort of elementary teachers and a couple secondary teachers, actually. And they'll be following up next year. And I think Dr. Byrne in his notification said we started our OG Academy officially last week for all of our elementary special education teachers. With the exception of our DLC program teachers, they'll go into our next cohort. It was early in the year, and we need to keep those programs building and supported. So we have close to 20 teachers. Yesterday was day 2. We started on September 10th was our first day. Yesterday was our second day. We have fellows who'll be supporting, and 10 teachers will be going through their This year, their practicum, and next year, the other 10 teachers will start. It's a 2-year practicum. I know that many of the board members were supporting our own OG Academy and starting, so thank you for all your support. We have launched it. We're excited. Our teachers are excited, and hopefully you'll be learning more about it throughout the year. So thank you.
All right, and at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the rest of my colleagues who represent and lead these other disciplines and departments. And I'd ask you each as you go around to just remind our board members and our public who's watching, fans at home of all.
Amy, I'm wondering if we should do questions for each section first.
Sure, if you'd
Okay.
like to.
So thank you. And Jen, welcome to the table. So into reading and that K-3 literacy piece is a huge lift, and thank you for all your work to do that. My question is, so year 1 is implementation, right? Year 2, year 3, my guess would be, how do you revise the curriculum? How do you assess it? How do you, what changes in instruction need to be made? How are you thinking about getting the feedback from the classroom teachers, as they finish each module, so that going forward, you have their feedback?
It's a great question. So already we've been pulling, really relying on our pilot teachers quite a bit. We've already been receiving feedback about some of our assessments. We've made changes and revisions already to some of the assessments to make sure that they not only align to the program, but philosophically to what the teachers need in their classrooms to differentiate their instruction. So we've already been deep into that work. Additionally, one of the things that we really need to do is get out into classrooms. One of the things that I thought was so fabulous when I first saw the framework was there are 2 columns in that framework that says, what are the teachers doing? But most importantly, what are the students doing? And so really getting into our classrooms, studying what our students are doing, and looking to see if the students are engaged in the learning that we want them to be doing. And so we'll be doing a lot of that work together as we go throughout the year.
And there also is a component of data collection and analysis as we go along. So we have a well thought out assessment profile that we use throughout the year. And there should definitely be some linkages, and that will inform us of what kinds of tweaks we need to make. But it is a long-term process.
Yeah.
So the notion that, year 1 is implementation year, every year is implementation year and learning year, because the kids sitting before you are different each year and their needs are different and will present challenges that we need to continue to explore through our professional learning with the teachers.
Go ahead, Katie.
Thank you both so much. And Jen, welcome. This is a really exciting year. This is a big change. And I was fortunate to run into an elementary educator at an open house, and I had asked about the rollout. And they said something that I thought was just fantastic. And they were commenting on, that it's a lot of work, and the teachers, are feeling that because they just care so much about delivering what it is to teachers. But this particular person said that, the important thing to remind the teachers was that they all know how to teach, right? And that this is a different program, but they know how to teach, and that they will do right by their students just for that, which I thought was just really beautiful. And I wanted to share, but I was curious just to hear from both you, Jen and Amy, what you think the general sentiment is across the 5 buildings. How are the teachers feeling about it? How are the students, what's kind of the vibe?
I think people are going into it with a very positive attitude. They want this to be successful. It is a lot of work. Very thankful. Last Friday, we had our first early release day, and it was very valuable. We shared out very kind of systematic templates that they could use to plan and just to help them get through the resource. It's a lot of pages, but that's one of the beautiful things about the program, is that everything is embedded in one section for them. And so truly just in whatever ways we can to support the time that the teachers need to get through the materials, to make sure that they're prioritizing the learners, that they're having time to look at their assessments, to really figure out what they need to focus on more. But I feel like it's been a very positive start. But with a lot of I think whatever teacher that was that said it probably said, shared the sentiment of a lot of folks around the district.
Thank you. And if I can just add, from a board perspective and to Dr. Burns' point about this being a continual implementation and learning process for all of us, please come back to us if you need more and if things change. And as you go down the course of this action and something needs to pivot, we want to hear that and support that.
Great, appreciate that.
And I think everybody's really interested about going forward, what happens with 4-5. So we
course.
expect to hear a lot about that as well.
That was one of my questions. So the fourth and fifth grade, you're focusing on writing process and grammar. Is this a new resource that you're using, or what are you using, especially for the grammar piece?
No, it's the same program. However, it has been updated. The units of writing that we are using have been updated, and we've been really focused on the grammar and mechanics. That was actually the lens in which we were looking at student work for the fourth and fifth grade this past go around, and almost doing a little kind of mini studies on refreshers on some of the aspects of grammar and syntax and all of that. So, I think that's the work of the community as we move forward, just to study how well K-3 is going and to decide where we need to go for fourth and fifth grade.
Thank you.
And just one more piece about the K-3. We know that the legislation is K-3 literacy, but as a district, we were very intentional to begin that work thinking preschool through grade 12 plus. So we will naturally be coming forward throughout the curriculum committee meetings with updates about the K-3 literacy resource, instruction and assessment that's happening there, and also grades beyond 3 and what we're seeing and how we're going to approach that.
Go ahead, Greg.
Thanks for all the updates. Any challenges or issues at the early stages worth flagging?
Honestly, time, right? This takes an extraordinarily amount of time. Time for teachers even, like I know I'm learning a lot in the district. And so just looking at the structures of time here has just been something we may want to continue to talk about. But, the effort and the willingness to engage have been phenomenal. And again, I want to reiterate that the expertise that we have around the table and the pilot teachers have been phenomenal. They have come here after school with me quite a few times to kind of process what's going on in their buildings. They've volunteered to go into other buildings where the grade levels didn't pilot. The collaboration and the expertise across our district is something you all should be very, very proud of. Again, I would say the biggest challenge that I see at this time is time.
And then just sort of a quick follow-up that's sort of related is, I know we had a lot of discussions at the board level around the amount of time that we'd be taking for the professional learning days that we added to the schedule. I think we should make sure that we're tracking that as we go forward to make sure that that time is really being utilized appropriately,
Absolutely.
that we really need all that time, not just for the ongoing this year, but as we roll out 4 and 5,
Right.
to make sure that if we're thinking about, okay, we're gonna have to take extra days for that, is it the right amount of time, or maybe we can dial it back?
Go ahead.
Just one more. I was curious, Amy, piggybacking on what you were saying, could you just explain a little bit about how and when we connect the different levels back to each other? And I know that you do this work and that your office does and the department chairs, but is there ever an opportunity where we have the secondary teachers kind of talking to elementary school teachers or about the skills that they see in high school that are either very strong or maybe a bit lacking, and how that relates to the work being done in middle school and elementary?
We do, and I think one of our efforts now is when we think about, for example, grades 4 and 5, when we move forward with that work, there will be K-3 voice in that work moving forward. So I think part of it is just how you structure and design committees and how you design research and implementation plans. And then, of course, the ongoing opportunities with professional learning, PLC time, et cetera.
And will that, so the K through voice helping to inform the 4 through 5, will there also be that middle school level, that 6 also coming to like, this is what we need these kids to come in with? And
that's why we started the work with that. So the core review team did like the heaviest lift, but remember, above and beyond the core review team, we had that steering committee, the district steering committee, and the intent was exactly what you're getting at, ensuring that we're thinking about what's happening in ELP, because certainly our little ones there are developing pre-literacy skills. And then what is the long view of really an articulated literacy program for the school district, preschool through grade 12 plus? Because the bottom line is, grade levels to some extent are arbitrary, because there are the standards and there are kids that are at the standard, there are kids that are approaching, and there are standards that are beyond. So even beyond the grade levels, we need to have teachers confident to teach the children, meet them where they are in every single classroom. So that is part of our regular practice and design.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I think that, sometimes just having like those concrete examples are really helpful. When a kid is coming to sixth grade, this is what the expectations are of, English B. And so this is how we're preparing them in fifth grade.
And as
So-
a matter of fact, I often hear, and I'm sure the department chairs would say this, the 6-12 folks, they really want time with the elementary. The middle school wants time with the high school. That's time that they find very valuable. And likewise, grade level staff horizontally across the district. You'll hear a first grade teacher say, I want to be with all of the first grade teachers in the district. That horizontal and vertical planning is super important.
That's great. All right. We'll move on. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning. For those that don't know, I'm Tim McGuire, your Instructional Technology Coordinator, and I'm here today to represent the librarians and some of their recent work. To set the stage, just a little bit backtrack in time, last school year, the elementary librarians, and there's 5 of them, worked together to develop a set of course descriptions, K-5, as well as a scope and sequence. So that requirement we're in pretty good shape on. After the end of the school year, some of the elementary librarians were able to get together and they worked on developing stage 1 curriculum for K2, and there's 5 units at each of those grade levels. So that's the work that's there, but they want me to emphasize the work is in draft. So librarians have already asked for time to come back together and review their work they've done so far before they proceed forward in grades 3 through 5. So that's some of the work to happen there. In addition, this year, I think things to put on the radar, the Freedom to Read law was slipped into the state's budget this year, and it's a law that's effective immediately. So one of the things you can anticipate to the Board of Ed to receive is at some point, some new policies that have to be adopted. There's going to be 3 areas or 3 policies that need to be adopted. One is a challenge materials policy. One is a collection development policy, and the third is a display and programming policy. There's already guidance for our staff in a lot of these areas. I'm already working with Marge, and she's been in communication with Shipman about what actually needs to go to the board level and what can stay more in the handbook level. But that's work that the librarians are going to be participating in. All the librarians K-12 have expressed a lot of interest in the makerspace work. In fact, just this past week, I was talking to one of the high school librarians, and she's interested in developing a cart at the high school level where staff in other areas can check out the cart when they need an extra set of resources for activities they're trying to do there. And at the elementary level, looking closer to aligning some of the activities more tightly with what the curriculum is that we've been developing. So more work and learning to do around makerspace development in the library spaces. Along that line, some of the curriculum work is also going to relate to our digital literacy work. That is a unit of study at each of the grade levels now for the K-5, and the work is already happening there. One of the things we're keeping an eye on is what that looks like for inclusion of artificial intelligence, and I'm taking the perspective that that falls within digital literacy. And I also want to emphasize that I don't believe that it should be on the librarian's shoulders exclusively to carry digital literacy or artificial intelligence literacy, but they also have the opportunity to touch a lot of students there. So we're going to continue to develop some opportunities for work there on them. And as part of that work, and I'm positioning this now intentionally, we're using a number of resources at especially elementary level. For example, code.org comes to mind, Code Monkey comes to mind, Common Sense Media comes to mind. Some of those resources that they're all fantastic resources. Some of them aren't going to stay free. So we need to kind of like position what do we need to really keep as core and moving forward that. And especially if we're going to include AI literacy, like what can we adopt that makes sense? And that's, again, we've been leaning on free tools. I don't think we continue to do that for much longer. And also, I'm pleased to say that the 2 of the 3 library projects have been completed. So if you haven't had the opportunity, go see the new libraries. They're beautiful. The 2 librarians at Royal and Hindley have been working hard to get those spaces up and running and also kind of maximize the use of spaces. We now have dedicated areas for what I see as maker space or STEM. And there's also like dedicated green screen space or green room space. So we were just there as a group, the elementary librarians on Friday, looking at the Hindley Library and honestly having conversations like how are we going to arrange the content here? What might we use this space for? So good conversations to have forward, and I'm thrilled with the work we've done so far. So I think I will pause there.
That's
And I
great.
know you have some questions.
Thank you.
perhaps.
I appreciate that you said that, that AI work and the digital literacy work should not just be solely on the shoulders of our library media specialists. Like that's the world we live in now. That is everybody's job. It's been a minute since I've had elementary school students. Can you remind me how often they're actually like is there the library class and what that schedule is
Sure.
looking like?
Sure. So K-1-2 and our district has scheduled block time each week to go to the Library Media Center, where it's essentially a drop-off scenario, and the library media specialist has a lesson and a book selection opportunity. The 3-4-5 model is more what we call flexible approach, and typically time is scheduled between the librarian and the 3-4-5 classroom teachers where the librarian can push in or the class can come down in support of topics. So for example, if a teacher is doing a research project, maybe it's a state study, the librarian can come in and showcase materials and help support the teacher with that. The other thing is that the book selection time is more flexible for them, so that typically the classroom teacher will, head on down and go pick your books now before we start the next thing. So it is scheduled by each librarian with those teachers 3, 4, 5. And I would say that it varies a little bit from school to school. Some it's very regular, like every week, but others it's in chunks of time. So it might be all 3rd grade this month and 4th grade.
Gotcha.
So.
And then going to your question about, or your comments about the new policies and the new legislation.
Sure.
And maybe this is a question for Marge or Eric or Dave, but when do you think, is that something we'll see this fall? Is that something that?
So
Is this the
so
immediacy
yeah,
issue
so,
or?
yeah, I mean, I don't want to jump in here, but the law is essentially effective immediately. So we need to work on this promptly. We have some stuff in place at board policy level that I think can be adopted, but I'm not the legal lawyer
Right.
to determine if that's okay, if we need a separate document for libraries. And I should mention that this is a requirement for not just school libraries, but also public libraries as well. So I imagine you're going to hear a bit more about this, but we're kind of waiting, I think, for Shipman to give us the best guidance for it. I know, truthfully, Marge has been in contact with them. I know it was again yesterday, although I haven't had a chance to touch base with her about what the outcome of the conversation was yesterday. But yeah, it's going to be on your radar.
Come soon.
So.
Okay.
Thank you. I love these meetings. These are my favorite ones. So I always have a lot to say and questions. Just a couple quick things for you. I think that piggybacking off the legislation, Eric, it would be really great if we could have, like a sort of like 1-page overview. Obviously, we can all read the bill, but in terms of like those specific 3 policies and what we think it might mean for us, what it might be covering, however the timing of that works out and is appropriate, I think that would be like a great just like informational piece for the board. I also, with the digital literacy and the component of AAI, I wanted to ask if the Darien Public Schools have any sort of partnership with any of the platforms in terms of access and privacy. I'm actually taking an AI class at NYU right now, and while NYU is quite a bit bigger than Darien, they have a partnership with Google Gemini where NYU has access to it, and none of the information that is put into the applications are used for like learning tools and shared beyond. Just curious if that's something that we might be exploring in terms of, responsible use and protecting privacy, data, all of that.
So I'm fortunate or unfortunate to be the one that reads all the privacy policies of all the vendors as people make staff requests going forward. And I can tell you, we do have in our Darien Learn platform, you can actually sort by artificial intelligence what's already been looked at and vetted as far as what's permitted for staff and what's also acceptable for students. And right now, I think there's currently 16 software programs that position themselves as AI-based. One of the challenges is that this changes so incredibly quickly as far as what's available and appropriate. And Gemini is a perfect example. So right now they're giving it away to college students, and that might be part of the experience that you're having there. But they've also, since June, opened up I think they've made something like 82 updates to their platform for school districts. And I'm looking at Greg a little because he and I were at a conference at the end of June, and he's texting me, "Hey, did you hear about this?" And I said, "No, that's not true." And I'm like, "Wait, no, that is true now." So that's the kind of things that are happening. We do have Gemini as a application that they call it now. I think they call it the Gemini Canvas. It's essentially their chatbot. That's available for all staff. That's been the case since about December last year when they made it available. It is available currently for our Darien High School students. Google has changed the rules and said we can open it to our elementary students, but I'm like, let's proceed thoughtfully on that before we do that. Similarly, they have another product called Notebook LM, similar positioning. It's currently available for all staff to utilize to help create content that they can work with their students on. In theory, we can permit this for students. In fact, I was just reading an update this morning before the meeting from Google on that particular product. But we're not paying for any of those resources. And some of the stuff that's available through Google for Gemini isn't available to us based on the tier that we pay for our Google integration. We're on the foundations level. So again, I was kind of addressing before, I think if you want to really fully adopt some of those, even Gemini resources, we need to position this in the budget going forward on that. There is also a few other products we're looking at, but I think Gemini is one that's going to have a big influence and factor on what we start doing with students.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Just to follow up as it relates to the AI and especially utilization within the different age levels. So, I mean, I saw a recent study that said like the retention by a person, if you write down something versus you do it on a computer versus you use AI, is like 80% if you write it down, 30% if you do it on the computer, and effectively 0 if you use AI. So as we're attempting to actually educate the kids, like, is there any, like, what's the rationale for giving an elementary school kid any access whatsoever to AI? And I would argue maybe all the way through. Like, what is our rationale for that?
Sure. So there's a lot of evidence that's being developed as far as what does support learning, what doesn't. I would say there's certain types of use of AI that certainly doesn't. So if no teacher is telling the students, "Hey, go to AI, here's the topic, I want an essay," and use AI to create that essay, that's not a good use of AI. I would suggest that there's probably scenarios where a use of AI tool can be helpful. And what exactly that is, what the evidence to support that's still being developed, and not by me, by the experts out there. My position right now is I believe it's at the elementary level, in some situations, it could be good for brainstorming and or a pushback partner. What I mean by that is, so when I taught third grade classroom, one of the challenges was when I was doing writing instruction is I introduce a new topic. Here's a new strategy. We're going to work on incorporating hooks in our essay today. And here's me modeling this. And now go ahead and try this out. And in my class of 20, I guarantee you 14 of them are like, boom, I know exactly what I'm going to do and start. But then it's those 6 that struggle to put that pen to paper. And I end up spending all my time sitting with them and conferencing them and never actually really getting a chance to circle back to the kiddos that have already written something. My thinking right now is that you can use a tool like School AI as a brainstorming partner and create a very specific prompt where those few students might engage with that as a first step to say, "Hey, can you help me with some ideas?" Now, understanding that a tool like School AI is the teacher has full access to what the the chat looks like, but also has a lot of control of the prompt. The prompt won't feed the student the information. It'll help conversate with them. Now, does that make sense? Would we do that with a kindergarten classroom? Probably not, right? But maybe a third grade classroom on occasion. The other use that we're exploring a little bit is, for example, helping students pick what they want to read next. So here's our library collection. The librarians really engaged and busy right now, and maybe, you know, the student can go to it and engage with this chat box. Hey, I really like this Dog Man book. What's another author that might have similar books that work for me on this? One of the, and last example, and I'll let you do it what you want. One of the things I'm hoping to do with the gifted teachers this year is they do a big debate element as part of their work later in the year. One of the things that we were brainstorming and talking about is what if they could do a practice run with an AI chatbot. So before they go ahead and, you know, face off in the classroom, what if they have a partner that's an AI partner that could push back and say, you know, have you thought about this? Or here's my, you know, contrast. Those are scenarios that I'm looking at.
So I appreciate all the examples. I mean, I would take the other side of the argument on the third grader. I would say that struggle for figuring it out is exactly what we've discussed as a board, that they need to figure out how to overcome that. Like, that's a good thing. And the teacher should identify them and go interact with that student, as opposed to
Certainly.
handing them a computer and saying, hey, here's your answer.
No, that's not my position.
Broadly speaking, I think we as a board, before AI is rolled out and given access to any of the students, we as a board need to determine what's our policy around this and how do we think that this should work.
And I think it's tricky, just how quickly AI changes, and then, you know, I think it's definitely a challenging conversation. I don't know if Dr. Byrne or Dr. Potter, you have anything, like, how do we position ourselves as a district? I mean, again, this is a topic that I think we all are very interested in, but how do we handle it?
Well, I think one, we're in a learning position, so understanding the technology, which frankly is still rapidly developing. So being very thoughtful about what, if any, applications we use, that the safety measures and the privacy pieces are in place. But then thinking about how do we ensure that our kids, when they leave us in the system, have the skills to use this tool that's going to be a part of their world. And frankly, it's a part of their world now, whether they realize it or not, and whether we realize it or not. AI is infused into so many things. So I think it's a lot of exploration, a lot of learning, and a lot of caution, frankly, because there's still so much that's unknown and so much that's rapidly developing.
Just on that note, I know colleges, even in college courses, some professors in various areas are not even using AI, whereas others think it might be a good idea. So I think I absolutely agree with you. We need to be cautious about this, especially at the younger ages, where the challenge and the process is really, really important toward learning. So I agree with what
Yeah,
Greg
so
said.
it's a tricky balance because it's caution, but it's also ensuring that we help our kids develop the skills that they need. We don't want them to leave us and be completely clueless as to what AI is and not know how to use this tool to their advantage in their own learning. So
I agree. I agree with that. I did want to just ask one more question about the library studies, because I know in the past we also had a robotics and coding kind of project, at least I think in some of the elementary classrooms as part of their library time that they spend. Is that still happening? Just in terms
One
of
the units is
STEM
in
kind
fact
of
titled-
initiatives?
Yeah, one of the units is in fact titled Computer Programming and Makerspace. And so the after-school robotics program is still running and underway, but there are also some robotic experiences that are part of the computer programming. So I think the picture, no, I don't know if the picture I had included, there's one I may or may not have included that showed the librarians using the Indie robots, which are like a K-1-2 project.
I think it was kindergarten, first grade, but it was an exposure to that.
Yes,
which
absolutely.
is
That's still happening.
important too. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, so I'll give a high-level overview of physical education. We are using the Healthy and Balanced Living Framework, which are aligned to state and national standards. And there was no published health curriculum prior to this past year on EduPlanet. And so what we did was we began with overviews in stage 1 for grades 7 through 12, and those are all completed. They will need some minor revisions over the course of this year, but they're in really good shape. PE is seriously lagging behind in the scope and sequence department and stage 1. So that will be work that I support the PE teachers in doing this year. Professional learning will continue with, I think, just really understanding what those healthy and balanced living standards are, and thinking about, again, a continuum preschool through grade 12. I don't think that there's been a lot of investment in that kind of professional learning for that department. So it's something that I'm interested in exploring systemically this year.
My question for you, Amy, is, I mean, who's leading this PE work? Like, we don't have a physical education department chair, or, you know, is this something going forward that, you know, do we need a stipended position? Do we need to think about how this is structured?
So that is something that Dr. Byrne and I have spoken about, because there is not a clearly named leader of this department like the many you see around the table. It's not just the curriculum that I've noted is behind, it's also even the professional learning and the access of the staff in that department to, for example, CAFER, and seeing, you know, that's the Connecticut Association for PE and Health Teachers, like having contacts throughout the state to really bring back best practices here. That's been lacking. So that's something that Dr. Byrne and I are certainly thinking about as we think about drafting and going into the next budget cycle. For now, I'm getting to really know very well the healthy and balanced living framework standards, which is also good learning for me. Okay. And then school counseling. School counseling, what we're thinking about also is there's a lot of interest on the part of the board and certainly on the part of administration to be thinking about the executive functioning that we really need to be building within our kids. And that is, again, like Tim was just saying, not owned by any one person. That's got to be owned and lifted by all departments and all grade levels. So where you'll see some of that come in really explicitly, though, is through the school counseling, comprehensive school counseling curricula. We also are thinking about the requirement in grades 6 through 12 for all students to have a student success plan. So this is work that I am engaging in with Kathy Oster, the Director of School Counseling, and will continue to come forward and share those updates with the board in future curriculum committee meetings. You'll see that also, some of that work outlined as we revise the strategic plan moving ahead. Those individual student success plans will also be where you can really clearly see how we're getting at content standards, like you were saying, Robin, with regard to writing, but also like transfer of skill and those other things that we began our conversation with earlier today. And to Greg's point about children finding a passion, the really an interesting thing about those student success plans is that's where you can start to see what kids are really interested in. You know, you think about interest inventories, career inventories, and you begin those in 6th grade.
So what does a student success plan look like? Can you just give us a brief overview of what that?
Sure. So you start with interest inventories when children are in 6th grade, and then you think about kind of helping to identify mostly an asset-based lens. Where are kids finding success in their learning? Where are the areas where you need to strengthen? And then really it's just about creating kind of a portfolio for a learner to help them develop throughout the way that helps connect, like you were saying before, Katie, how are we really connecting what happens grade over grade? This will follow a student through.
I did have questions on the student success plan too. So how would it be developed and tracked individually, grades 6 through 12? And then would parents be informed of that process? And because it almost seems like it ends up being an annual conference with a parent of some sort, if you're creating a student success plan that goes from grade to grade. And I'm really, I think it's a great idea. I'm just interested in kind of how, what your thought is about this.
And actually, it's supposed to be a vehicle to help support continued and strengthened communication between the child, the school, and home. And so right now, we as a school system have Naviance, which is kind of our portal for where, and it's where most school districts in the state of Connecticut keep that kind of information. And parents, you may or may not be aware, many parents are aware of Naviance actually because of the whole college application process. So what this is about is really beginning and thinking about 6th grade, opening up that access and creating, you know, a common collaborative space between a child, the school system, and the parent to bring the child grades 6 through 12. So yeah, Robin, you would see that through Naviance, and we'll be doing more communication with the parent community about that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Robin, you're up. 612 math.
612 math.
With the designation of honors geometry this year, our focus was on the entire pathway from where students begin in pre-algebra through honors pre-calculus. So these updates strengthen our vertical alignment across the grades, ensuring that students experience a coherent and rigorous progression of learning as they move through middle school into high school mathematics. Our ongoing curriculum work continues with stage 3 development, where we're intentionally examining the implementation of curriculum through a special education lens. This ensures that learning experiences are accessible, inclusive, and meaningful for all students in math. In terms of professional learning and priority work, our department is focusing on 2 key areas this year: team teaching and co-teaching models, strengthening the way 2 teachers can work together in a classroom to maximize support and learning for all students. And our good work with thinking classroom practices will continue with an emphasis on low floor, high ceiling tasks, which provide an entry point for every student while also offering challenges for those that are ready to receive it. Differentiation to meet the diverse needs of our students across the classrooms, and evaluating data to support spiraling content so that essential skills are revisited and reinforced throughout the year. Altogether, this work strengthens both our curriculum and our instruction while supporting our vision of the graduate and really our overall vision in our department of helping students grow as critical thinkers and problem solvers. And most importantly, all of this work really advances our vertical alignment, ensuring that every student's mathematical experience is connected, coherent, and prepares them for success for the next level. The 3 pictures on the bottom are actually non-curricular tasks. That's how we open up our school year for students and when they first enter, at least for the first day in math. On the left is Algebra 2, and those students are doing Venn diagrams of what they have in common and what they don't and what makes them unique. And we focused on learning styles there, actually. In the middle, that is geometry. They are using spaghetti, I think, to build the most structural tower that they can. And 7th grade, of course, on the whiteboard saying, "We love math."
No, thank you. Ronnie, could you just explain what spiraling content means?
Sure. So that is really being done mostly at the middle school level in grades 6, 7, and 8. And we have a lot of students that accelerate in math at the middle school. So it's really important that we continue, if they're in Algebra 1, to revisit perhaps percents, fractions, those basic skills that they're also being tested on at SBAC, and they might be tested on at SBAC in math that they haven't seen in 2 or 3 years. So it's important we continue to spiral. But as well as that, even within a particular course, if there's, when we're looking at student work, if there's something that they didn't master, order of operations, we want to continue making sure that we look at order of operations, even though we're going to move on to the next unit, because in math, any hole that they get along their journey gets bigger and bigger as the math gets harder and harder.
Great. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Could you just talk a little bit more about what's going on in team teaching and co-teaching?
Sure. So it's been almost, this is the 2nd year that I've been working very, very closely with the special education department chair. It's very important to me that whether there's 2 math teachers in the classroom or a math teacher working with a special education teacher, that we are providing as many strategies as possible for students to find success based off their learning styles. And that ranges from color coding to scaffolding to providing those differentiated opportunities. But we really want them to be a 50-50 relationship. We don't want to see a math teacher teaching and perhaps a co-teacher in the background. We want to see both teachers actively participating 50-50, where students really are getting a 2-for-1 deal.
If I can just follow up on that, this is great to hear. And I think it would be really helpful too, if at some point, in this conversation, the board could see a little bit of data around this. There was something that we had talked about at an earlier curriculum meeting, and I think it might have actually related to science, Christian, which will come up. But, you know, a snapshot of like, especially with the classes that kids are waving into, and how are they doing, and how many kids are dropping, you know, that either have waved in or not. And I think it's particularly interesting in the high school level, especially in both math and science, where that we do have a progression of, you know, taking geometry and then algebra 2, but because those disciplines can be so different, biology to chemistry, and how, you know, one student could really take very naturally to one of those that might be more math-based or maybe less to another. I think that would be really interesting as we talk about helping students to kind of like find their path and also just understand some of those different strengths. So I think that could be a really interesting exercise for us just to look a little bit about, you know, how our students are understanding the different components of the classes year over year, and how successful they are. And this kind of ties back to also to the concept of the pressure that our students face at Darien. It's an incredibly rigorous school, which I'm so proud that we have opportunities for students to do that. And I'm very cognizant of our students feeling the need to constantly be in, you know, the highest class, and recognizing that, you know, strengths come in different places, I think would just be a really great conversation for us to keep top of mind.
Absolutely. And thinking about the fact that, again, if we go back to the idea of individual excellence, and really student success plans should help children navigate, especially as they move up through the grades. You know, it really hurts my heart when I hear kids say, well, I won't take that class because it's on an elective scale, right? That Colleen and I talk about, again, what counts as a STEM credit, what counts as a fine arts credit. And sometimes by force of schedule, right, and meeting graduation requirements, kids have to make challenging and difficult decisions. And we want to make sure that we open as many pathways as we can for all kids. So thank you for recognizing that. I do think we should keep that at the front of our conversations and curriculum committee meetings. All right. And then, speaking of science.
Good morning. Just as a reminder, I'm Christian Dockham, the 6 through 12 Science Department Chair. Over the summer this year, we did some significant work in both middle school and high school, in terms of both completing and making completing some courses and making some significant strides in others. So one of the big lifts this summer was providing an opportunity for our astronomy course to get the scope sequence stage 1 and our stage 2 really fleshed out and designed, and that is currently being implemented as we speak, with 2 sections this first semester. At a middle school, all 3 grade levels have probably 95% of the lessons laid out in their stage 2 documents for all 6 units at each of those levels. And really what we were looking at this summer is highlighting some of the interim assessments that can be, interim assessments that can be implemented in each of those units that can give us a sense of where our students are at the moment, and help us differentiate and help us think about how we can shift some of the instructional strategies in our classrooms to support those students. And then at the high school, the big project this year was really focusing on our 10th grade year. So our 9th grade biology courses are very well set up in terms of our curriculum. And now we're moving into the 10th grade and building on what we've done in 9th grade to create scope and sequences for both our chemistry 300 and chemistry 400 classes, and making sure that there's alignment and connections between those 2 sections as we sort of shift what chemistry looks like for a little bit for our 10th graders. In terms of our professional learning, we started this year by looking at student work protocols and making sure we're focusing on the learning that's available in the student work and not necessarily in the grades that the students are focused on. So that's something we've been working with our teachers on, and focusing on what is this artifact tell us about student learning, and not necessarily like this is an A and this is a B and this is a C. And so really digging down into the artifact and highlighting where it shows mastery of a skill or mastery of a content piece. And that really ties into some of the work we're doing at the middle school and high school around PLCs and making sure that we're utilizing student work and student assessment to understand where our students are and highlight the learning that's taking place and not necessarily highlighting how many are getting A's and how many are getting B's, et cetera. So that ties into, again, modeling those connections between our vision of the graduate and student learning in our classes. And I've tried to be more explicit in making some of the connections with our work with teachers. So for example, yesterday we were looking at our positive classroom environment domain of the single point competencies for our growth and support plan with teachers, and really giving them a chance to dig into each of those indicators, highlight what that might look for students in the classroom and what to look for teachers that might relate to those indicators. And then at the end, really getting into our learning outcomes for the vision of the graduate and saying, like, where do you see connections between the work that we're doing here and the communication and the curiosity and the integrity competencies in our VOG. So providing some modeling for teachers where they can then take that and say, like, now that you've done this lab, where do you see these learning outcomes from our vision of the graduate in the work that you're doing, so that students can become more reflective in their work. So that ties into our PLC work at both schools, as well as implementing instructional rounds throughout our 6 through 12 department that will be taking place throughout the year this year.
Thanks, Christian. Go ahead.
Thank you. Christian, I appreciate your comments about like truly kind of mastering topics and understanding those learning competencies, and that really being the goal beyond just a letter grade and a numeric scale. I know we talked about this last time too, but freshman biology has been one of those classes where there seems to be a very large gap between the 300 and the 400 level. And we had talked last year about, you know, getting some of this data that I was just mentioning too, in terms of, you know, the number of kids that are taking the classes, the number of kids that are able to stay in the class, which I don't think that we've seen. And I do think that would be a worthwhile exercise. But I am curious then, you know, especially in that 300 to 400 level biology class, like how can we best understand what is going on in those two classes and how they're different, and be able to evaluate if the difference between the 300 and 400 level is appropriate, or if we might need to be looking at, you know, a 350 or somehow modifying that content so that we don't have kids who don't have a place, right? Like, I mean, I think the thing that I'm concerned is that certainly some students really excel and do great in the 400, and certainly some kids are quite challenged by the 300. But how many kids do we have, and where is the place for those ones that are really struggling in 400 but aren't challenged at all in 300?
So I think there's not a lot of examples of students that you know, really struggle in 400 and then go down to the shift to 300 and have a 99 overall. And I would have to go in and look at specific students. As I said last year, we really don't have a lot of students dropping and leveling down from our 400 to 300 class. In fact, this year, I have not had one conversation with a freshman in the first 3.5 weeks of school about leveling down. So I can say that as a data point, like, we haven't had anybody in our 400 level bio class level down to 300 as of yet. We still have a week, and then we have other opportunities. But certainly, you know, when we see anecdotally, I can think of examples where we see a student level down and be accurately placed and getting an A- or a B+ in our 300 level class. But I would have to look at specific examples and see if there were specific students that had a C+ in a 400 level class and then a 99 in our 300 level class, which would indicate you know, they were that specific student in the profile that you mentioned. So I think what we see is a 400 level class that is challenging for the vast majority of students who are in the classroom. It gives some of our students who are really wanting to push themselves an opportunity to experience that productive struggle. And I just had a conversation, not necessarily in bio, but a conversation with a student this morning who wanted to drop from a 400 level chem to 300. And it just, our conversation was like, you have the background based on your transcript, you have the recommendation of your teacher last year, and you have, like sort of feeling it because you are going up in a level now, and it's that productive struggle and that sort of punch in the gut that we talked about. And she said, like, you know what, I'm going to stick it out for another week and see if I'm feeling any different at the end. And, I know that I have some more opportunities to level down at the end of the quarter. So those are the conversations that we have in terms of students. But it's specifically to the profile that you're mentioning, I would have to dig into that a little bit deeper.
And then just with the example that you had mentioned, what additional supports are we offering in those conversations, right, to the student, and to develop, some of those vision of the graduate qualities, that grit, that resilience, that, like, this might be hard for you, but you're capable, and you might have to work a little harder. It might not be as easy as sometimes we get used to. What's the conversation about them seeking additional supports and how we might be able to provide them?
So I think that if we connect it to the vision of the graduate competencies, especially independence in that situation, and being a self-advocate and really having the conversation with their teacher and saying, like, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed here, and what can I do, in the classroom, or what can I do outside of the classroom with you to meet, to sort of get me through this agita that I'm feeling and the anxiety I'm feeling of being pushed past my comfort zone in this classroom. And so I know our teachers, especially our honors level teachers, are very understanding of that experience, especially with our freshmen and our sophomores who may have, this may be their first opportunity at an honors level class. So my conversation with this particular student is, talk to your teacher. I know that he's supportive of the students in his classroom, and he may not know, because you have an 85 in the class right now, he may not know that you're feeling this stress or the strain, and he may just say, like, oh, here's some things that I've noticed, or here's some things that we can work together on to sort of get you through that initial struggle and understanding about what the rigor and what the expectations of the class are.
So I appreciate that. And I think absolutely those are the skills that we want to develop, and the skills that students absolutely need when they go to college and when they're beyond high school. And I think that, as we have 14-year-old students that enter the high school, and they come from having a team model at the middle school. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard that these students feel like they go to college at 14. So for us to expect them to be able to have these high-level self-advocacy skills, I think is potentially what might contribute to this idea of pressure, and us not acknowledging that success does mean something different to everyone, and that an 85 might not be good enough to some, and that an 80 might be like an incredible achievement to others. So I'm wondering how we just build in things that when we have those conversations, that yes, we encourage those students to advocate, but maybe we also copy the guidance counselor and we have something on that, just so those students know that they're supportive and they're not expected to do this all on their own. I think those are kind of the ways that we can really utilize and the resources that we have while these students are working towards independence. Because I think expecting 14-year-old students to walk into Darien High School and be able to function at a collegiate level, especially with diverse learning profiles. Some kids might struggle with executive functioning, some might have ADHD, some might have challenges with reading and keeping up with that. I think that I would love to see us, especially in some of these honors classes, because I can tell you from anecdotal and personal experiences that if a child's in an honors class and they are performing at a C or a D level, a flag needs to go off. And, this idea that it's fully on them to be independent at 14, when we know they do have an academic profile, that's telling us that these kids need a little more support. So I'd like to see us looking in ways that we can help them grow those skills and not just expect them to have them fully formed.
And I certainly appreciate that. And there is, I can speak that this year, I think there's a recognition of that, especially at the ninth grade level. We have in our science department have a PLC that's working with our reading specialists at the high school on just that, is looking at executive functioning skills of our ninth grade students and what we can do, not only at the honors level. I can tell you that there are honors level teachers in that PLC, but also at the 300 level, and bringing in some of those executive functioning skills into the classroom and making those, teaching those executive functioning skills explicitly to students, to just that support their development in self-advocacy, development in work ethic, development in organizational skills, right? And so that those go hand in hand with the instruction towards meeting the academic and skill expectations of the course. So I think that that's something that the high school in the transition from 8th to 9th grade is being looked at and actively being built and designed in the PLC process there.
And Katie, just one other thing that I want to just add on to what you said that I think is really important. It should never be the expectation that that entire independence is on any student, even a senior in high school. So couldn't agree more. And additionally, the piece about having the school counselor be an important part of that conversation is really critical, because it may appear that there's an issue with, the child and their experience in a biology class, and that's only one part of the child's whole school experience. So I think, as far as parents and our students and teachers and the school counselors, we need to be thinking about not just what appears to be causing the blister, but really looking at, the whole child, their whole school experience, and having a conversation that considers all of those things.
So I don't want to speak without data, but I will say this, probably to your point, Katie, also. It's probably, there probably is a great deal that we could certainly get more information about. I'm confident school counselors meet with their students to talk about these changes, or as if kids are thinking about changes. But I don't want to speak and say that as a fact, but I certainly would reach out to Kathy Oster and see that. But I know that's a big part of their relationship with students. I also would like to say that within the disciplines, teachers meet with their students within their respective disciplines, not limited to science, about those decisions that they're making, and hope that's true. But again, we can certainly get that information and share that with Dr. Byrne and find out. I also would like to say that both learning center teachers and the special education teachers work closely with the teachers, saying, let's talk about this. What does this child need to support and be successful in an honors class or a 400 level class? As well as some of the related service providers. And I know school psychologists also are there, and APs. But that to say is there is a whole cadre of people who are on board. But I think what your question is, how does that happen, and how is everyone committed to that? So we certainly can follow up on that.
I think it also goes to the 8 to 9 articulation piece and making sure that everybody's speaking to each other, that the child is placed in the appropriate class moving in. And I say I'm currently living this drama in my household, and I think my child feels very supported by her counselor and teachers in that. So, Robin.
I just wanted to, I agree with what Katie's saying. And I want to also note that, especially with these honors courses, even as a sophomore or a junior, I'm also speaking about the kids who are not necessarily identified for special education services, where they do have a more frequent interaction with teachers or PPT, the meetings, because many kids who might be in a 400 level class honors, and have prior work in honors level classes, a lot of times they also have a pretty heavy course load, especially as, you get into the sophomore and junior year. And for the self-advocacy piece and executive function pieces is an important element that I think still, even as a sophomore, many students may not have still at that point. So I agree that it needs to be even not just the freshmen, but some of the teachers. I think it would be helpful for the kids to be successful. And in science in particular, there might be learning differences where some students may have a harder time handwriting notes. And I know that some of the 400 level classes, science don't allow them to do notes on a laptop. And if they're not identified for special education services, that they might have a different learning need, it's hard for that kind of a student to have a conversation with a teacher to say, you know, I'm having a hard time even being organized to do a handwritten kind of thing. And I think there needs to be maybe a little flexibility with teachers to allow for different learning styles so that all of the students can be successful. And then additionally, I've mentioned this before, but I know in college they have like the equivalent of a Google Classroom where some teachers will have class notes. I know at DHS, some other teachers may not provide class notes. And so it makes it very difficult for students to catch up on missed work. And the teacher a lot of times will say, well, just get it from another student. But if you don't have a good relationship with another student and you were sick or you had a doctor's appointment, it makes it very difficult in the absence of having a textbook that you can look at to actually make up work and be successful. So I think in terms of support structure, I think we need to be making sure that all of the teachers are functioning at that same kind of support level across, you know, whether it's honors biology or honors chemistry or whatever it is, so that it doesn't matter what teacher you have, you're still getting the same level of supports or class notes or things that you can have as resources to help you.
I think to that point, this is why we're engaging in all of this work of creating this, you know, this huge document of, you know, this is what happens in the scope and significance, this is what happens in these units, and to having all that in one place is the purpose of why we're doing this year's long project. All right.
Can we move on to sixth form English?
Yes, let's go. It's 9:20.
Good morning. Excuse my voice. I'm definitely working on a cold, so forgive the graveliness of it. Before I dig into our summer work, I wanted to speak back to some of the conversation that was had about the transition and the voices being represented there. The instructional rounds work has been really helpful in doing that within schools itself, but I've started to do some work on last year, bridging those gaps between sixth grade to fifth grade. So I've been able to bring some English teachers and social studies teachers even down to the fifth grade classrooms. Julie, when she was with us last year, came up to see some of the sixth grade classrooms, and we'll continue that work this year, I think. Our ninth grade teachers came down to the eighth grade classrooms to see what eighth grade life is like and, you know, what to expect when students come into ninth grade. And I know that the eighth grade teachers were hoping to make those similar types of visits. We just ran out of time in my rookie year. So it's something that's definitely important for us to continue. This summer, the English department also focused on those transitional points. At the middle school, we brought together our sixth grade teachers from English A and English B, our special education staff, and the middle school reading specialists to really do a comprehensive curriculum audit. We were looking to ensure there was alignment between those two classes and took a good look at 3 years worth of SBAC data to help focus any revision work we were going to be doing at our curriculum. Our next steps are going to continue this work over the year and specifically looking at how we can best utilize our literacy lab practices as part of our MTSS process at the middle school. The high school level, we developed stage 3 materials, those lessons and classroom activities for our English 9 course. And then over the rest of the year, we'll also do that work for our Honors 9 course. I'm thinking also about our learning priorities for the year and the conversations we had about AI specifically and our students. When I've had to have conversations with students who have struggled, often those conversations are because they ran out of time and they needed to do a quick dive into AI to finish the assignment, or they didn't feel confident that their words were worth saying, and they didn't quite feel confident finding a way to reach out to the teacher for that support. So I've made our whole goal this year to think about how we can get students to both value our work and be invested in our work, but also ways to help them feel confident in their work. And so our professional learning is going to be focusing exactly on that, fostering student engagement and investment and confidence, specifically through differentiated instruction and student-centered learning. We're going to be looking at learning styles and how to best draw in those students so that they both feel confident and that they understand that this thinking work that they're doing and communicating is truly valuable. We'll continue to focus on the development of our literacy skills and practices. Dennis Cabrera and I will continue to focus on strengthening our interdisciplinary connections in our English and Social Studies departments. And at the middle school, I'm particularly excited to develop staff's capacity to use data to support our learners more strategically.
Thanks for the questions on English.
Kristen, I just want to say thank you so much. The way that you were talking about the conversations that you're having with students who are struggling and getting into the heart of like why they might be using that is exactly the work that we should be doing. And thank you so much for that. That is, you know, really looking at the whole child and looking at their strengths and getting to some of those insecurities and those qualities of the vision of the graduate about how to overcome them. You know, like on a side note, my daughter and I had like, I thought a really great use of AI in terms of English. She'll kill me for saying this, but she definitely delayed on her summer reading until a couple of weeks before school. And most of the time I've read a lot of books that are on their things. But we put the list in terms, and she put a couple qualities of what she was looking for in a book, something, you know, that would grab her interest, something that, you know, like what the length of it was. And she kind of created this prompt with criteria to help her select the book that, you know, would enable her to read it and get it done in time and engage. And I thought that was like a pretty great use. Like she did the work, she read the book, but she was able to kind of get that personal insight. So, you know, and then the last thing I just wanted to say was the point that you mentioned so quickly about working with Dennis and, you know, kind of that integration to strengthen those things, especially in those classes, you know, like social studies, that is a different discipline, but that relies so heavily on the skills learned in English. That's so fantastic. So thank you for that work.
Just one note on the interdisciplinary approach between English and social studies. I think this is a great idea, and I'm glad you're continuing to develop that. The only comment that I would make is that, especially at Darien High School, as we get into AP Lang, AP US History, many students take both those APs, which are very difficult. But I think for those who only want to take one or the other, I think it becomes a scheduling challenge often, because I think we only offer one section for those that are in that kind of a group. And so I think I would just ask that as a district, we maybe allow for a little more flexibility for those students who probably already have a very difficult course load in their junior year, to allow for some flexibility so that they don't necessarily have to take both of those, or level down for both, you know, if they really like one subject more than
But the
another.
challenge with that is staffing
I
and
know.
budgetary.
Yeah.
So every course you add, you have to staff
Right.
it. And, you know, we have so many incredible options at Darien High School, but, you know, the more options you add, the more challenges you have, and because you only have so many slots that you can put a course into a program.
I realize it's a
Yeah.
challenge, or maybe some creative options that could be offered in those. cases.
Your ears may have been ringing because we all had department meetings yesterday, and it's something that Dennis and I brought up at our department meetings, to have that conversation with our staff about looking at those opportunities for students, and both supporting interdisciplinary work, but also making sure we had opportunities open to students, that we weren't limiting them because of that.
Nice segue into Dennis's work over there.
Yeah, I feel like Kristen stole all my thunder. Because I feel like what I'm going to say is mostly that we are going to work very collaboratively together. We were having this very conversation about the American Studies, American History AP, and the AP Lang, and we are working on creative solutions. So I think it will be much less of a problem next year than it was this year for those students. So we're working towards a way to serve all of the students who want to take variations of these different courses. So, but this year our department is focused on 3 interconnected goals that align closely with the district's mission and enhance teaching and learning, expand professional capacity, and strengthen our communication. First, we are deepening our collaboration between English and social studies at both Middlesex and Darien High School to create a more seamless interdisciplinary approach to literacy and critical thinking. We're also working to strengthen the staff capacity to use data to inform differentiation. So I think of this as really fundamental to our work, because we're thinking about not just the students who struggle, but also those high flyers, those kids in middle school who came in already knowing all the stuff and need to be pushed. So I think it's really key. And I do think the PLC structure at the middle school is going to go a long way to helping us accomplish this. So I'm very thankful for that. So together, I think these efforts are going to help to improve outcomes, but also improve that sort of vertical alignment that we're striving for, and just a more cohesive teaching community. So I think one of the key things that Kristen and I decided at the start of the year is that we want our departments to at some point come together and meet together to sort of discuss what are the things that we do that we have in common and where do our disciplines maybe differ in how we teach writing, so that we can kind of be on the same page and students understand. In some instances, our expectations are the same, they're identical, but in others, they part ways, and that's for very specific reasons, disciplinary reasons of the difference between writing for your English teacher versus writing for your history teacher. So those are our goals in a nutshell.
Thank you. Socialized questions?
Dennis, thank you. I appreciate the way you expanded on that interdisciplinary. That's really great to hear. Can you talk a little bit about the change to offering an honors Western civilization course? I found out what Western Civ was when my oldest was a freshman, but I had learned through sitting in this room for 10 years to be afraid of it. So I'm curious about if this change is going to be something that is a faster pace or more content and more difficult compared to what is currently, or if we're really looking at a change for both the 300 and a 400 level.
I think the biggest difference will be that it's easier to push those students who want to be pushed even further. Believe it or not, there are students who feel like it's not challenging enough, which is incredible to me because I do think it is a very rigorous course. So I think it's difficult in our classrooms right now in the 9th grade level to meet the needs of the student who struggles and the student who excels. So the honors course is meant to be able to push those kids who really need the extra challenge and still meet the needs of those kids who struggle. So I think in the end, it will be beneficial to students and how they learn.
This will come before us later.
Yeah.
So we can talk more about it then.
Yeah, so I so what I'm hearing you say is that this is really a way to differentiate, right? To be able, okay, great, thank you.
Moving on.
Okay, good morning. Again, Scott Webster, K-12 World Languages Coordinator. We're making strong progress in our curriculum development. In kindergarten through 5th grades, we completed stage 1, as well as refined our scope and sequence at all levels. At the secondary level, we've updated our Spanish 2A curriculum, which again is 7th grade. We've revised Mandarin 3, developed our new ASL 3 course, and updated both AP French language and AP Spanish language to align with current standards. On the professional learning side, we're continuing our work on strengthening our K-12 vertical alignment, also exploring how AI can support language acquisition, and continuing to partner with library media specialists to deliver innovative instruction to our students. Tim and his team have been wonderfully resourceful in that respect. Thank you. And we're also using instructional rounds to better understand and support key transitions at both MMS and DHS entry points to inform content and recommendations, modeling after Kristen and her group.
Thank you, Scott. Moving on to Colleen.
Nada, as we say in Spanish.
Sure. So my name is Colleen Thompson. I'm the Director of Visual Art and Music. Our work in music, I've reported on over the years as we've really been doing curriculum revision from the bottom up. So we started looking at our ELP and kindergarten curriculum. We've now gotten all the way up to 4th grade in that deep dive. So now that means that we're starting to talk about how the learning pre-K through 3 translates to an instrument. So we're looking at our strings and our band curriculum. It's been really great for our elementary teachers to share out the learning so that the students are really applying that to an instrument, and it's not like they're starting something fresh. They already know how to read music and they're understanding music well. We've been grateful for the collaboration time. Those early release days allows our teachers to come together from all elementary schools and really collaborate on how the work is similar and different at each elementary school and in vocal music versus instrumental music. Our focus right now is curriculum development and revision for ensembles. That's tricky in UBD format because we don't think of things in units. We're really thinking about students developing their ability to sing and play their instrument throughout the year, but also throughout the years. And we have students coming in and out of the program. So we've really organized it in three units for each ensemble. It's the kind of technique and individual playing and singing unit. It's the literacy unit and it's the performance unit. And the performance unit talks about not just how you perform in an ensemble, but also how you observe an ensemble. And so the concert etiquette. So that expands throughout the year and throughout their time in music. All of our students have exposure to music pre-K through 8. So we want them to become not just great performers, but great music consumers as well. The pictures you see here, Mr. Andrade is teaching about the properties of sound in music tech, which is a really great STEM connection. Mr. Grauer is rehearsing. This is on the first day of band. They're already out and playing. We have our first concert next week for DHS. And you see Mr. Allen at Ox Ridge having students mirror him to get ready to play their barred instruments. And so I got to witness that firsthand and how they transfer that. Then moving over to visual art, I am really grateful to have the opportunity to work with the talented team. Jacqueline Samus has done great work with them. Their curriculum is really in great shape. So when you see the chart and it looks like visual art might be lagging behind, that's just because things haven't been put into EduPlanet yet, but we're working on that. We are working on our itinerant art teacher collaboration. At the elementary level, we've got 4 art teachers for 5 schools. And our elementary assistant principals were really great at scheduling them this year. So we've got no school has more than 2 art teachers and no art teacher is in more than 2 schools. And they're also working in 60-minute art blocks. So every student is having a really full experience with just one teacher. And that collaboration time has been really, really important. We're continuing to work on our scope and sequence. We're also starting to talk a little bit more about our display art practices and how we are just showcasing student artwork throughout the district. I think we do a really good job at showcasing it throughout the town, almost more so than in district. These beautiful pieces of art that you see in the boardroom, we'd like to have those placed in more areas around the town so students can really demonstrate their skill and their development.
So Colleen, with the transition back to 60-minute art, we no longer have the extra art block, and then the curriculum has been revised to reflect that.
Thank you for touching on it because that was definitely a pain point for us in that budget
Understandable.
conversation. So
Yes.
thank you. Last but not least, CT with Greg.
Saving the best for last, I
Yeah.
think. Hi, Greg Darren. I'm the Career and Technical Education Coordinator for 6 through 12. And I will touch upon some of the highlights that we have this year and over the summer. So curriculum highlights at the middle school, our stage 1 is complete for all the classes that we offer. So we will be moving into working on stage 2 for our 7th grade computers course and our 8th grade design and modeling course. And if we have time, we will kind of foster some of that into the engineering class as well. Some of the summer work that we did, we had a couple teachers working on a couple of courses there. The pre-law stage 1 is now complete, as well as the DIY stage 2 is complete. And I said this last year, and I'm going to reiterate this again. The teachers who are working on this curriculum work, especially over the summer, are having a really good experience. And I'm saying that because it was brought up again just at the department meeting yesterday, how they're utilizing the stuff and the essential questions that they worked on over the summer, and they're bringing it into class, and it just makes them think differently. So it's been a positive experience for some of the teachers working on the curriculum. And this fall, we're going to continue our work on the Principles of Engineering course and our Cybersecurity course, which is underway, but we're still continuing to develop that. We have a couple of workshops for the middle school and high school departments to work on this curriculum after school, just to keep this fresh in our minds and continue working on it so we can get as much benefit out of it as possible. Some of the professional learning in our priority work, I want to continue to strengthen our course pathways and career awareness and readiness, and try to identify some maybe gaps in our pathways and provide, hopefully, in the future, adjustments in curriculum and courses to offer some experience in some of those areas that we may be lacking. And AI integration for teachers. And the thought behind this is, right now, kids are using AI, especially the high school level, whether we like it or not. And I think it's important at a very soon that we have teachers be able to guide some of that work that these kids are doing. And teachers will not be ready for that until they can use this proficiently and easily and use it in their regular workflow to see where the benefits are and see where the pitfalls are. And when they gain enough experience in it, they're going to be better prepared to guide students with this. And Greg, to your point that you mentioned before, you're absolutely right to a point. The way I saw kids use AI last year in some of our courses was a point where they're not learning at all. They're just having it do the work for them. It's spitting out the answer. They're not looking at the answers. They're submitting it, and there's no learning. And what I see the shift now, as maybe kids are getting more experience in it or the resources are more available, I'm seeing them having more of an interactive dialogue. And if we could guide students to that point where it's more of a collaborative resource, just like having an intellectual conversation with a colleague or collaborating with another peer, it's actually a really intelligent pair. You could have that conversation and that dialogue to be able to learn and ask those questions. What am I doing wrong? Where are the mistakes in what you're saying? And really building upon that and reading it. And I think that's important that we guide students sooner rather than later, because as Dr. Byrne was saying, when they leave high school, and it's happening right now, the people that are the most successful are able to utilize these technologies to the best of their ability.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I think one follow-up on the AI point. I mean, I agree with that. Like the kids are definitely using it. I think that there's, I think we're seeing some colleges go back to the blue books, and some high schools go back to the blue books for like writing and doing things like that, which forces the kids to demonstrate their actual capabilities. And so there's no ability to use AI with the blue books. And so I think that that's one alternative to make sure that they're actually learning versus relying on a device or relying on AI. I also think that as it relates to AI, like in terms of educating the kids, making sure that they understand the idea of fact checking and source credentialing and making sure that the information is actually accurate. I think even adults just inherently think that AI is accurate and correct. And I don't think that that's always the case.
Absolutely, questioning resources. And I'm not saying diving completely into AI. Your point to blue books are absolutely a great way to assess students to see what they know. We're doing that in computer science classes, handwritten stuff for them to see what they've learned. And hopefully, if they're learning whatever way they're learning through AI or not, we could assess that in a meaningful way.
I also just want to take a minute to recognize Greg's leadership. I think the first conversation I had with Greg was, I'm surprised that we don't apply for the Perkins grant. And have you thought of that? And then immediately he submitted the application, was awarded the funds last year, and has made really great use of those to bring some really interesting technology and experiences in for our students and additional professional learning for the staff. So I just want to, again, recognize Greg's leadership in that area.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I've said this before, but it's worth repeating too. I think the tech ed department in particular is just so exciting. It's really growing as it should be, as our world is growing in that way, and has really become a department that students are really excited about. They arrange their schedules and they choose their electives, to take those classes. They're learning transferable skills. And so I just want to express gratitude that we have those options at Darien, and I look forward to continuing to hear about, how you're staying on top of trends and what we might offer students. So thank you for that.
Of course, thank you. I'll mention those pictures too, now that I'm looking at them. Picture to the left over there was last year with a Woods 2 class. They worked on the community bench. They called it the community bench project, but it is for the courtyard Serenity Garden that is coming to fruition now. The benches are out there. And then the picture to the right is from our business and entrepreneurship class, where the students come up with their own kind of mock companies and pitch their ideas to a kind of some sharks, some members of the community, where they try to get some funding for their mock companies.
And you look for volunteers to be sharks in the spring. I enjoy that. Some other board members may want to.
Great
do that in the
experience if you
spring.
could come and be a shark. Yeah, it's fun.
Great. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I just would point out, I know this is probably one of our longer, if not our longest meeting of the year, because really we talk about all of the work that's taken place and where we're going next. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity for you all to hear directly from the people who are leading the work, who can speak really about the work that's happening out in schools with our students and staff most directly. And I'm not going to review this entire list here, but we've indicated that there are some things that you'll hear more about in future Board of Ed Curriculum Committee meetings. And then I would also say that as we think about coming forward with the next iteration of the strategic plan, you'll hear and see in that some of these things that we talked about integrated really obviously as action steps into the strategic plan. So be on the lookout for that.
That's it. All right. Thank you all. This is a long meeting. I appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy days to sit here with us and share all your great work. We will move on to public comment.
There's nobody in
There's
the
nobody.
audience
All right.
and nobody on.
I will take a motion to adjourn. All right, Katie.